When Jesus was crucified, officially for the treasonous claim that he was king of the Jews, more accurately because of the envy and fear of the Jewish leaders who hated him too much to accept his claim that he was the Son of God, and therefore heard it as blasphemy. And even more accurately, because it was the will of God that he should die for the sins of the world. His crucifixion drew a crowd. But it wasn't the angry mob that the Pharisees and Sadducees had feared. From the accounts in our four Gospels, it sounds like most of the people who witnessed that momentous event were on the side of Jesus' enemies. Or maybe they were just the only ones who felt free to give voice to their sentiments at that place. But we know of the 12 disciples, or rather the 11 by that time, the only one mentioned as being present at the cross is John, and that only in the Gospel of John. But in all four Gospels, we find mention of a group of women who had been regular followers of Jesus also, along with the 12. In the reading of our Passion account 2 nights ago, we heard St. Matthew's description of them. There were also many women there, looking on from a distance, who had followed Jesus from Galilee, ministering to him, among whom were Mary Magdalene, and Mary the mother of James and Joseph, and the mother of the sons of Zebedee. And a few verses after that, after Matthew has described the burial of Jesus, he says again, Mary Magdalene and the other Mary were there, sitting opposite the tomb. So these are the same women who figure so crucially into our Easter gospel at the beginning of the next chapter. Now after the Sabbath, toward the dawn of the first day of the week, Mary Magdalene and the other Mary went to see the tomb. It seems quite likely, just from the context of Matthew, that he's naming these two women as representative of that whole group that was at the cross. And the other Gospels bear this out. Combining all four testimonies, we're able to name 5 members of this group, which may seem like a large number, but it fits with Matthew's description of them at the cross. Many women who had followed Jesus from Galilee, ministering to him. There easily could have been more. They were devoted followers of Jesus, as devoted as the 12 had ever been. All of them had followed Jesus from Galilee. They had come with him to Jerusalem for the feast of the Passover in order to minister to him. Now, what does that mean? We normally think of Jesus ministering to us. It means they were looking after him. They were taking care of his needs. Some of these same names show up earlier in the Gospel of Luke when that evangelist names women who provided for them, meaning Jesus and the 12, out of their means. So some of them had money. Some of them were making the contributions that Judas was tending. Contributions to see to it that Jesus and his apostles in training didn't go hungry. But that's not all they were doing. When they were actually with him, as they certainly were on this occasion, ministering to him would go far beyond contributions of money. They would cook for him. They would bring him his meals. They would make sure that he ate, because you know sometimes great men get distracted. They would probably wash his clothing, maybe make suggestions about his appearance. Jesus, I think your beard could use a trim. He was the Son of God. He never sinned. But that doesn't mean his hair never stood up and back. They would do for Jesus and the 12 all the same things that they used to do at home for their husbands and sons when they had husbands and sons, or that they would love to do for the husbands and sons they never had. In at least one case, the mother of the sons of Zebedee, traveling with Jesus, allowed her to continue to do those things for her sons, who were his disciples. We know who washed the disciples' feet before the Last Supper. It was Jesus. But do we know who cooked the Last Supper? And who brought it to the table? This is as close as the Gospels come to answering that question. Many women had followed Jesus from Galilee, ministering to him. It was probably them. So now that the worst had happened, the unthinkable, now that their teacher, their Lord, the planet that they had revolved around like adoring moons, was dead. Now that he was in the grave, what was left for them to do? What would become of their cozy little second family now that the heart had been carved out of it? Who would there still be worth following and listening to and ministering to for all his needs? Who would need them now? Hard questions. But questions they didn't need to answer just yet. Jesus was dead, but he still needed them. They had one more ministration to perform. Jesus had been buried so quickly on Friday. Some of his other followers, people who had money, a lot more money than the women had probably, came out of the woodwork and took the matter in hand. Wealthy, important men like Joseph of Arimathea, who donated this tomb, and Nicodemus, who had shown up with 75 pounds of mixed myrrh and aloes, spices to put in the winding sheet when Jesus' body was wrapped. Men of resource and decisive action, whose assistance the women no doubt deeply appreciated. But still men. 75 pounds of myrrh and aloes? An impressively large number, but a very masculine tribute. The women had watched the preparations and burial on Friday, but they had not been invited to participate. The clock was ticking, and the servants of the great men did all the work in haste. Doubtless these women who had offered Jesus their monetary and domestic care for the past few years, like so many devoted mothers and wives, had noticed many things that had not been done just right. 75 pounds. And all myrrh and aloes. I don't think Jesus even liked aloes. And don't you think we should spread a cloak over the body? Because he always slept that way. What a pity the soldiers took that cloak, but I think we have his spare. And that tomb, it's so big, I didn't even get to go in, and I saw at least 2 places where we should put a vase with flowers to brighten it up. But most importantly, fundamentally, his body was anointed with spices. Yes, honor was done to it, yes, but we didn't get to do it. It should have been us. We were his caretakers. We'll do it again, and we'll do it better. It's our responsibility. He's ours. And after that, I don't know what we're going to do. Why did they wait so long, all through Saturday, before they came to offer this final ministration? Saturday was the Sabbath. Anointing and arranging a dead body would be work, and unclean work at that. And it would take a while to get everything together, especially since the spice merchants wouldn't be open on the Sabbath. And on the other hand, why didn't they wait a little longer? That is, why were they pushing dawn so hard the first day of the week? Well, the body wouldn't be getting any fresher. You remember from the raising of Lazarus a few weeks ago, it was the 4th day that he had been in the tomb, and the body stank. This is the 3rd day. The internal organs would have begun decomposing, or at least that was their expectation. It was going to be unpleasant. It was going to be a little horrifying, actually, working with that body, the body of one they had loved so well after he had been dead 40 hours or so. And they didn't want it to be any worse than it had to be. So they gathered on Sunday morning while it was still dark, and they made sure they had everything in hand that they were going to need, and they began heading for the tomb, screwing up their courage, strengthening their resolve for the ordeal that lay ahead of them. They were going to confront death in his lair, on his home turf, grim death in the countenance and lineaments of their dear fallen Lord. They were going to weep in his presence. They were going to perform their final duties. They were going to say goodbye. But little did they know, there was another visitor heading for that tomb to perform a very different ministration. An angel of the Lord. He was coming not from Bethany or from Jerusalem or wherever it was that the women gathered. He was coming from heaven, from the presence of the Lord who had already risen from the dead. He was coming not to do service to the dead, but to throw the tomb open so that all could see that the dead was not there anymore. He was coming not to confront death in his lair as if death were some worthy, scary opponent. He was coming to throw open the doors and windows contemptuously and let the spring breezes come in and play where the reaver had so lately held sway. Behold, there was a great earthquake, for an angel of the Lord descended from heaven and came and rolled back the stone and sat on it. His appearance was like lightning, and his clothing white as snow, and for fear of him the guards trembled and became like dead men. And well they might. Those poor soldiers had been set in place to prevent Jesus' disciples from stealing the body. Which disciples? You mean the ones who ran in the Garden of Gethsemane when a mob of the high priest's servants and hangers-on came to him to seize Jesus? Those guys, huh? Fishermen mostly. I think there's a tax collector. Not a soldier in the lot. This will be easy. And then the earth shakes, and the pre-dawn darkness lights up like a flash of lightning that decided to stick around for a while. And there's a shape in all that brightness, a mighty man coming down from the sky. And they remember what his cross said. And they remember what the people said when they were mocking him. He said he was the Son of God. We did not sign up for this. This was not the job. And the guards who had been set to make sure the dead man remained safe in death's lair became like dead men themselves, stretched prostrate on the ground, petrified with fear, hoping that the heavenly form would leave them alone. And the angel rolled back the stone and sat on it just a little while, as if he were guarding the tomb now. And then he went in. And that was probably when the guards got the nerve to get up and scamper away. The way Matthew tells the story, the way he telescopes it, we could easily read it as that the women were on hand themselves to see the angel descend from heaven and roll the stone away. But Matthew doesn't say that they were, and we know from the other Gospels that they weren't. They weren't there when that happened. Matthew's giving us a little extra information, as he does also, if you look at the verses right after our reading got done, where he tells us that the chief priests gave the tomb guards money, hush money, so they wouldn't tell what had happened, and so they would claim that the disciples stole the body while they were sleeping. So like that, he must have learned also about the angel from one of those guards, which makes sense if you think about it. If you had seen an angel descend from heaven and roll the tomb away, the stone from the tomb away, would you drink your own Kool-Aid? Would you believe that the disciples had come and stolen the body? You wouldn't. You would be very susceptible to the message of the resurrection once it started getting around. Doubtless one or more of those guards became believers in later days, and that is how we know about the angel and his grand entrance from heaven. But at this point, the women don't know about that. Probably they felt the earthquake as they neared the tomb, but by the time they got there, the guards were gone and the angel was within, and the only strange thing that greeted their eyes was that large stone rolled out of its place. Rolled out of its place and maybe toppled over onto its side too, if the angel was sitting on it. And now they feared that they had lost their last chance to minister to Jesus. From the other Gospels, we deduce that Mary Magdalene left the group at this point, just simply having seen the empty tomb, and ran to tell Peter and John before she had even seen the angel, convinced that the enemies had stolen that last chance from her, hidden his body. But the other women pressed onward and inward, and their persistence was rewarded. They saw the angel. And that angel, who had descended like a thunderbolt, full of glory, and laid stern warriors low in terror, now spoke comfortingly to these faithful women and told them not to fear. Do not be afraid, for I know that you seek Jesus who was crucified. He is not here, for he has risen, as he said. Come see the place where he lay. Then go quickly and tell his disciples that he has risen from the dead. And behold, he is going before you to Galilee. There you will see him." They had set out, steeling themselves to confront a corpse, the limp and pathetic shell of a man who had moved heaven and earth, and their own fervent admiration. What they found instead was an immortal spirit, an angelic messenger, assuming a bodily form, but subject to no bodily limitations, and least of all to death. And according to his strange and wonderful news, there was no corpse to mourn or tend anymore. Jesus, whom they loved, Jesus, who had died, had risen from the dead and had left the domain of death on his own two nail-scarred feet. Or maybe without using his feet at all. Surely the risen Christ had no need to wait at the entrance of the tomb and hope that the angel would be on time to let him out. So they departed quickly from the tomb with fear and great joy and ran to tell his disciples. With great joy, because they believed the angel's message. With fear, also because they believed the angel's message, and they believed that he was an angel. They fled his eldritch presence. They fled this brush with the next world, with things higher and holier than mankind, and also his incredible message. For although it was the best news in the world, and it filled them with relief and fierce joy, it was also not of this world. It turned things upside down. It broke all the familiar rules. It contravened nature. And as they left in this heightened state of opposite emotions, Jesus met them and said, "Greetings." And what did they do? Did they run away again? No. Did they stay at a distance and regard him hesitantly? No. They came up and took hold of his feet and worshiped him. Because it was Jesus, and they knew Jesus, and he was theirs. In a new form? Yes. Surrounded with otherworldly mystery? Yes. Something higher and holier than mankind? Well, how can we say that when he is himself, by the amazing condescension and mercy of God, a man? He is the Son of God, and he is God. He is the one who is distant from them by an infinity, but became their Jesus, the one with whom they could be so familiar, the one whom they loved. He is the one that death by right cannot hold. He is the one who breaks the fangs of the grave and sends his angel to roll the stone away so that everyone can see the ruined maw. He is too strange, too holy, too divine, too other for sinners to touch or even to be near, except that he came for sinners to touch and to be near, and to die for them, and to pay the penalty they owed to God, and to usher them into everlasting bliss. He is not some unknown angel. He is their Jesus. They were prepared to minister to his horribly dead body. They will gladly serve instead his new and deathless body. And though they may never again have the sweet joy of feeding him, he will now feed them for the rest of their lives with that same resurrected body hidden in bread and wine, until the day when they get to experience the same great reversal that he just had, the definitive end of death, the abject powerlessness of corruption, the life that has no end. He was their Jesus, and he is our Jesus, and that life shall be ours too. Christ is risen. Alleluia.